You stole from ordinary people. You stole from GoFundMe campaigns. You stole from campaign donations. That makes you a scumbag, doesn't it?
Let me say this again. There was no theft of GoFundMe campaigns.
I mean, you kissed ass and you got your sentence reduced from 7 years to 3 months.
I feel like I'm the only person who's been pardoned in history by the way that you're accusing it and making me feel. But I really wish that people would at least give me a fair shake so that you can at least give me a fair shake and assessment in the future based on my actions, not my words.
Why did you choose to do that?
I have to tell you, I still haven't had a decent night's sleep. I'm going to have to work really hard on all of this.
The Newsagents USA.
Well, joining us now with his first UK broadcast interview is the former Congressman George Santos. He's just served 3 months of a 7-year prison sentence for fraud, deception, aggravated identity theft when Donald Trump commuted his sentence last week. George Santos, just explain to us what you did. What was the wire fraud? What was the aggravated identity theft? Spell out what that means.
Well, Emily, first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for your audience. It's good to be here with you. And to make this very clear, I made some very poor choices. And I know a lot of people, and I used to call them mistakes. No, they were poor choices. And part of that being, and as you can look at the court records and allocution when I did my allocution, I essentially straw donated to my campaign with my own funds and used the names of a lot of my family members to make those donations without their knowledge. And that is aggravated identity theft per se in the United States. But also, as far as wire fraud, you can only imagine. I think I had 9 counts of it, if I'm not mistaken. Every transaction you make during a course of action like that becomes a different count of wire fraud. So those were, just to sum it up, and for the sake of brevity and not going too deep into the docket, but that's kind of the crux of the entire case that builds up around my very self-destructive and self-inflicted wounds that I embarked in the year 2021 and into the year 2022 ahead of my election.
It wasn't just self-destructive. You destroyed a lot of people's livelihoods and lives. You stole from ordinary people. You stole from GoFundMe campaigns. You stole from veterans. You stole from ordinary people. This wasn't from rich, powerful men. This was from ordinary people who had just been trying to donate. There is one veteran who accuses you of taking his money saved up, £3,000. And when he heard about the sentence being commuted, he said, "It stuck me in the gut with a knife. It stuck me in the gut with a knife." You ruin people's lives.
So, Emily, I want to clear this because the story of the veteran is very sensational. First of all, I've never met him. He did not contribute to my campaign. It's not a political relationship. This was I was very involved throughout years, actually a decade and a half in animal rescue. It's something that I've always been passionate about, volunteering countless hours, spending thousands of my own dollars, actually tens of thousands of my own dollars. I was not charged for any conduct that involved any kind of misappropriation of funds and rescuing. More so, anybody who ever looked at the records, they can see that that's not true. Mr. Osthoff had an unfortunate circumstance that when he approached us in 2014 with help for his dog required a surgery, but unfortunately he had waited too long and the dog's chances of survival were 85%. I provided all this information in the past, and I can rumble through the past if it makes you happy, but I just want to make this very clear. I did not steal from a disabled veteran or a homeless veteran. The dog was not, it was past the point of rescuing, and the money that was raised was allocated and distributed to save the lives of other animals.
George,
That
I didn't mention animals. I didn't mention a dog. I said you stole from ordinary people. You stole from GoFundMe campaigns. You stole from campaign donations. That makes you a scumbag, doesn't it?
Let me say this again. There was no theft of GoFundMe campaigns. That's what I'm trying to clarify. You could call me a scumbag politically, but the GoFundMe, I will always defend that because that is actually inaccurate. So I would challenge you, Emily, to research that better. Just again, makes me a scumbag. I made some pretty scumbag choices, and I agree with you on that.
Okay. Well, let us just look at where we are now, because when you were first convicted, sentenced, you were meant to be paying back the money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. You've now had the slate wiped clean. That money doesn't have to be repaid. Will you still repay it?
My attorneys and I, after being posed this question now for the last 2 days, we hadn't put any thought into it, obviously. I just got out of prison on last Friday at 11:30 p.m., so it hasn't even been a week. There is no vehicle to do so, but we are exploring options. I think it's a valid question. It's a valid point. I am not obligated to, but I am morally and should be morally compelled to do so. And I have the desire to do so, because if I don't, it will follow me forever. And when I mean I want a fresh start, I want a fresh start with no pendencies. And I do agree that if we can find a vehicle and a way to do so, because the alternative would be to call the people who would have a claim. And I'm not sure that they want to hear from me, if we're being completely honest. So we need to find a way, and we're exploring that, and we'll try to do it in the most legal and above board way possible when I have the means to do so, Emily.
What do you mean legal and above board? I mean, you're going to try and pay the money back, right?
Well, when I say legal and above board, is we want to make sure that there is a proper way and mechanism to do this, and not just nilly-willy on the whim. I want to make sure everything is, when we come to a conclusion on how we do this, because we don't have the ability. In the court, we would have paid back the money to the DOJ, and the DOJ would have been responsible for that. We don't have that mechanism available to us. We don't know what the DOJ intended or how to distribute. So we're looking into it, Emily. It's definitely something that we have to look into morally, for sure.
George, of the people convicted in America to serve 7 years in prison, how many get out after 3 months?
Well, I'll put it this way. Of the people convicted to go to prison for 7 years in America for financial crimes, I don't know the answer to that, but I can say this: there is an unequitable disbursement of justice in my case. And I caution you to look up the Congressman Jesse Jackson from Illinois, who only served 30 months after robbing from his campaign coffers and from the federal government a total approximately of $900,000.
Sure, but you were
30
before...
months. 30 months, and he only served approximately 70% of that. Again, I'm not.
You served
arguing.
3 months out of 7 years.
I'm
no
not
one gets
arguing.
that deal.
I'm not arguing that. And to be honest with you, I understand your question. It's the power of the president is plenary in the name of clemency. And that is a question that, is to be posed to the president. A lot of people in America, including Democrats in a bipartisan way, thought my sentencing was politically charged and outrageous. I'm not making excuses for it, but I also sat for 41 days in solitary confinement in a prison under inhumane conditions. The punishment does not make sense. So I understand you guys are going to want to ask. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the second chance. And so many people have different ways of the way they receive the second chance. I received clemency. It was a surprise to me, and I'm grateful for it. And I don't know why I have to defend something that's been granted to me.
Look, I thought that the open letter that you wrote that was published was absolute masterful. I thought it was a piece of genius in PR in appealing to Donald Trump. Mr. President, I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for fairness, for the chance to rebuild. I know I've made mistakes in my past. And on it goes. Sir, I appeal to your sense of justice and humanity, the same qualities that have inspired millions of Americans to believe in you. I mean, you kissed ass and you got your sentence reduced from 7 years to 3 months.
Yeah, I understand. Look, the letter was heartfelt. It wasn't a PR stunt. I was sitting in a shoe cell in special housing unit by myself 24/7 when I wrote that letter. So I can assure you there was no PR stunt. And I've been writing the column where it was published for over a year.
Sure.
So it was just really me documenting and publishing my own thoughts.
I salute it as a brilliant piece of work because it obviously played completely to Donald Trump's vanity and his concerns or whatever, and you are now free. But I just think, we had in America last weekend the No Kings protest, and here we had Donald Trump behaving as a king. You shall walk free, whereas anyone else incarcerated in the system is not going to get out after 3 months of a 7-year sentence.
I just feel like this is very personal. I guess no, everybody's just making this very personal for me, and I understand I haven't warranted great sympathy from people, and I understand that that's my own doing. And I've had this conversation with Emily before, but I feel like I'm the only person who's been pardoned in history by the way that you're accusing it and making me feel by essentially I'm carrying. Is President Trump a king because he pardoned me? And what about the countless other people who have been pardoned in the United States in the history, including the former president who pardoned his entire family and to the tune his son? It's the power of the presidency, and the power of clemency is plenary. I understand. I have not been my own best advocate, and I understand that sympathy will not come easy for me because of my own past actions. But I really wish that people would at least give me a fair shake to, at bare minimum, show some sort of change so that you can at least give me a fair shake and assessment in the future based on my actions, not my words. But I understand your frustrations. I understand your concerns, but I remain very grateful to President Trump and his sense of humility and merciful sense of clemency in my case. And I'm sorry that you're unhappy with it.
George, back in January, it was on Inauguration Day that we were last together in DC. And I remember you telling me that you were the first Republican to condemn the January 6th uprising, the riots. Do you ever sort of dwell, I mean, not do you ever, you only came out on Friday, this is all very new to you as well, but do you sort of think that you have become sort of one of them, part of this presidential pardon? And I guess why we're asking about this now, and it's not that it's personal, it's that it's exactly the opposite. It speaks to a moment of American history where the rule of law seems to be kind of carelessly tossed aside, ripped in half, broken up, doesn't really matter anymore. That America, this great democracy founded on so much promise, is turning into a sort of a, one man's empire, a monarchy.
I vehemently disagree with that assessment, Emily. I was one of the first Republicans, if not the first, to publicly say that breaking windows and defacing the Capitol at the time was wrong. But I also was the first one to say that the overzealous, insane charges being dished out of DC prosecutors on some of these people who were merely on the lawn of the Capitol was absolutely a misuse of justice at the time. Again, two things can be true at the same time. Sure. But I'm gonna go back to this. And if you pay attention, not every J6er has been pardoned or commuted, because there were some who committed very violent crimes and beat up police officers. In one case, one young woman stole the laptop of Speaker Pelosi at the time and had intentions, or at least some, if I read correctly, intentions to sell it to the highest bidder or something like that. These people are far more than just mere protesters. But I also want to go back to another issue that you brought up. There is no king in the United States. President Donald Trump is not acting like a king. President Donald Trump is exercising the power that is constitutionally granted to him. And again, would you consider President Joe Biden a king who opened the borders of the United States to approximately 20 million people, ignored the rule of law, completely created decay and financial decay in our economy, and then on top of that, on his way out, pardoned his entire family who have not even been charged of crimes, or his son who had a plethora of crimes at the time and went through the process, which, by the way, I disagree with the Hunter Biden conviction on the gun cases because I believe in the Second Amendment. But I'm just giving you a contrast. Where was the outrage then on a man who was so hell-bent on exercising the power of his office to the benefit of his own family?
George, I just to say that for the record, I think we did express kind of how extraordinary it was that Biden had.
But you're saying extraordinary.
I'm saying
you're
wrong. I think it was a.
You're not calling him a king.
I think no. I'm not calling him a king.
a king.
I tell you the difference. I suppose the difference that seems to be clear now.
He's a Democrat and Donald Trump's a Republican.
No. It is the point that I'm making. I thought that Biden was wrong. Absolutely, I'm saying.
But you didn't call him a king. He exercises power to help his
family.
That's the action of kings and
because you are seeing
who put their families above all.
Okay, but you are now seeing Donald Trump instructing the Justice Department to go after Comey. He's now been indicted. Letitia James, she's been indicted. John Bolton, he's been indicted. And now, there may be wrongdoing there in the process of this, of course, but it looks like Donald Trump wants to punish his enemies, his political critics, and he wants to reward his friends like you.
President Trump, first and foremost, President Trump was viciously attacked. President Trump was viciously attacked and weaponized against by the Biden DOJ. This man's life was thrown into turmoil. And I just want to make sure, because I feel like we're all erasing the last 4 years and all the insane things. Look at the New York's document case. A very liberal New York City Superior Court, which is the highest court in the state, threw away the case against Donald Trump that was tried by Judge Egron and bought to them by Letitia James. Letitia James said her father was her spouse on a mortgage loan application, and then on top of that declared residency in Virginia when she's supposed to be the Attorney General of New York. When you look at James Comey, who testified under oath that he did not have any knowledge of leaks, when in fact he did. He testified under oath and he lied. Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro went to prison for 4 months for contempt of Congress, but it seems like whenever this changes directions of parties, there's outrage. Donald Trump's a king. I'm sorry. Look, I've been in prison. I don't know the details of all these indictments, but it wasn't President Trump. It wasn't really President Trump who's instructing anybody. That's just really another media talking point. And I would hope you guys would be better than take a sensational approach, especially because I have a great deal of respect for Emily. And I know that you can take the sensational approach. It makes great, fantastic TV, and your ratings are going to be fabulous. And hey, we all want to get paid and have fabulous ratings. But at the end of the day, I think there should be more balance. I think that we should really look at this, because I don't recall hearing anybody say President Biden was a king when he was dishing out all the pardons he did to his family. And I would like to know, is that not king-like behavior, sir?
Yeah, I think you have to step back from some of the things you've accused Joe Biden of, which was like running a bad immigration system or running a bad economy. I don't think that equates with executive overreach of the kind that we are seeing.
Well, of course not.
Right
it's
now.
Dereliction of duty. But
it's a different
Emily,
thing. I think we can agree with that.
yeah,
I mean, if you want to talk about
agree with that.
sensationalizing, I would just say let's try and get our criticisms in perspective of what we're saying. Let me ask you something
Fair
slightly
point.
different, George. Could you imagine a world in which you went to work for the president now? Have you had any offers? Do you think the administration would be open to you serving a role within it?
You know, Emily, my goal moving forward is not to get into government. It's really to get into reform. I want to advocate for prison reform. I want to help troubled youth, to teach them the values that I've learned the hard way so that they can make better choices and not end up in the predicament that I ended up in. I think I can take my experience and turn it into something positive and good so that I can help people.
Will you tell us a little bit about that experience? You talked about it being solitary confinement. 41 days, is that right, in solitary confinement?
Nearly half of my time I was put in solitary confinement in the special housing unit known as the SHU here in the U.S. under a fake death threat that came in but had to be investigated by the FBI. It was from a formerly discredited source on a previous investigation in 2023 that Capitol Police had looked into, found it to not be credible. Then this person, again, doctoring information, created another threat, and it generated an FBI investigation, despite my best efforts to explain to them. Now, the FBI worked very quickly. However, 41 days in isolation, denied my proper medication that I have been treated with for 22 years, denied actual contact, social contact, or being able to speak to my family beyond the 15-minute call once 30 days. They essentially use disciplinary custody on me, and the entire model of disciplinary custody, which is reserved for those who break the law inside of prison, essentially bringing in contraband or getting into fights. And then they just put another bow on it and called it protective custody. I mean, to the great detriment to my mental health, in which it was greatly ignored by the warden of the facility. And every single opportunity I tried, she refused to even address my attorney. My attorney tried to speak to this woman and she wouldn't talk to her. So I think that to see the conditions in which I was being given recycled underwear from other inmates that were dirty. I mean, they would claim it was washed, it was dirty. I wasn't given proper hygiene. I can only bathe 3 times a week. The linens that they gave me were all full of holes. They were dirty. They had stains. I mean, to the point where the sheets I slept on had what seemed to me like blood stains. And when I complained, they said that's as good as it's going to get. So I think that those are not conditions to house somebody who is not a violent person, I've never gotten into a fist fight my whole life. I'm a very non-aggressive and physical human being. And to see that they thought that they can do that to somebody with a platform, can you only imagine what they do to the countless others who don't have a voice and don't have a platform and the ability to go and write an open letter?
And can I ask what it was like when you heard that the sentence had been commuted? Because this came as a surprise. Am I right? This came as
Yeah,
a...
I saw it through the TV. Nobody knew it was happening. I called home, and my husband had spoken to the president already, as he called to notify him, and he was absolutely in tears. My entire family, they scrambled. It was very emotional. Emily, look, I've sinned. I'm a choir boy. I'm not a choir boy. I have sinned greatly. I have had committed terrible transgressions in my life that I am going to have to live with for the rest of my life. But I want to take all of that and the learnings and the teachings and do something good with it. I want people to see that good can come out of horrible situations. And as we said and discussed earlier, I do want to look and make everything right, not
George,
just some of it.
I don't want to get on the psychiatrist's couch with you, but when you talk about your sins and your transgressions, do you understand why? Because I look at a man who's really smart, who's come from a great place, who's had a lot of love in his life. I don't understand why somebody with so much ahead of them, professionally, you have brains, I mean, you could have been a really incredibly successful politician or businessman or advocate. I don't know. Why did you choose to do that?
Emily, I've asked and pondered myself that question, and I always come to the conclusion I was inundated with ambition, and ambition generates greed, and greed generates a very toxic mental state for a person. And it strays so far away from the teachings I've had at home. I brought great embarrassment to my family. My father, who's 62, didn't deserve to see this or actually experience this in such a public way. A man who's always been so integrity is an understatement for my father. My mother, who passed 9 years ago, would have probably been beside herself in the situation. This is not, you're correct. This is not who I grew up to be. This is not where I come from. This is not how I was raised. I learned much better, and I chose to make those poor choices. And the only explanation I have for that is really that the ambition of I guess it all just consumed me with greed.
Has it left permanent scars? I can't imagine what it would have been like to have been in solitary confinement for 24 or 48 hours, let alone 41 days.
It definitely has. I've been back home since 11:30. Well, I left 11:30 p.m. the facility. I got home at around 1:30, 1:40 a.m. And I have to tell you, I still haven't had a decent night's sleep. It's just going to follow me for a while. I already started seeing professionals, and as Emily just said, I already sat on the psychiatrist's couch because it's important to take care of your mental health. But most importantly, it's also important to atone that you are the reason you ended up in this situation. I put myself there. So I just have to work hard at it. And like I said, the road ahead, I created the critics in my life, and I have to accept that I've caused grief, pain, and hurt to so many colleagues of mine, people that are even political like-minded. So I have to figure out this. It's going to be a tough journey. And again, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the chaos I've caused. I'm sorry for the absolute insane death spiral and down spiral and the undoing and unraveling that I had very publicly. I mean, it's just, I'm going to have to work really hard on all of this.
George Santos, thanks. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you so much for being with us.
The Newsagents USA.